to the Haven Hang. I'm Camille Thurman, and I am super excited and thrilled to have somebody really, really special with me today on our final Women's History celebration with the Haven Hang. She is an incredible artist, and she is an amazing educator. She's a trailblazer, and I'm super, super, super proud and happy to consider her as one of my role models and one of my big sisters. Please give it up for the great Terri Lynn Carrington. Hi, Terri. Oh, we gotta unmute you real quick.
Duh, rookie
Hey.
mistake. How are you doing? Good to see you here.
Oh, I'm good. Thank you for being here. Part of the mission of the Haven Hang is to make an opportunity for young women musicians to hear from artists within the field their personal take on their journey, their experiences of balancing development as an artist, but also development as a woman. So I want to start off with this first question. Who were your early mentors that got you on the ground running with the skills that you needed to go towards greatness?
Well, my very first mentor was my dad, and role model. He taught me. My first teacher really. Then I had a lot of private teachers. When I was about 18, Jack DeJohnette, became a huge mentor of mine. Clark Terry was a mentor as well. Wayne Shorter became a big mentor of mine when I was about 21. Bernice Johnson Regan from Sweet Honey in the Rock, she was a mentor. Angela Davis became a good friend and mentor in some ways. I didn't really, think about it like that till later, more recent years. But yeah, there's, a lot of mentoring moments, inside of friendships. Diane Reeves is like a big sister to me. So, even though, she says I'm like her big sister now, I think that's the beauty with even mentoring, some of the exchanges that can happen when you can encourage each other and influence each other. That becomes really important as well. So I never look at it, like even I mentor a lot of, students that I have, but I learn just as much from them, in many respects.
Yeah. And what I love about your answer is that it was a whole community. It wasn't just musicians, it was people outside of the music too that could teach you about life and other things that strengthen and empower you, your mind, but also you as a person in navigating the world.
Hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
who are the people that taught you about like the music and the heritage and the culture and the understanding the significance of really carrying that?
Um, I think again, I have to go back to my dad. I mean, it's jazz is um, you know, very cultural. It's a community, and it's something that is a way of life almost. It's not just the music. Of course, the
Yeah.
music itself has a history that we should understand and pay, and respect it and pay respect to it. Um, but it's an evolving culture, and so I'm very excited about how it's evolving now and where I feel it's going as well. It's important to look at the history and look at the culture and hold it up, especially all the great parts about it, and also important to criticize it and make it better. I think that's what you do when you love something and you feel a responsibility towards something. So as far as really understanding what was existing in the music, my dad for sure, in the earlier years, and then you go uh, play with people and you get a little bit of somebody else's story, a little bit of somebody else's story, and all these gems, that are historical, important historical facts. You're getting like a living archive when you play with
Yeah.
musicians that have more experience than you.
Yeah. And like you said, that experience, just being in the bandstand, there's so many things that you don't even have to say, just being in it and working with these musicians, it helps you to kind of absorb those things that maybe you can't speak them, but you could hear and feel them to be able to know exactly what to do, that intuition and the spirit
Hmm.
of the music.
Yeah, I call it like musical wisdom. You know,
Yeah.
we gather that from the people that we play with and hang with. I mean, there's a lot of things you can learn just hanging with people, you know. So the hang is so important, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Like,
the big
and
one.
yeah, there's so much to be learned there. It's not all on the stage. It's definitely not all in a classroom.
Yeah.
So it's all the subtleties and nuances and things like you just said that you absorb,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah. So what was it like for you coming up? Because you started out super, super early. What was it like developing as a young musician and also trying to, as you're developing, playing, but also getting out there in the world and gigging and being able to find your path in this music? What was it like doing it at such a young age?
You know, when you're doing something, you don't really pay attention. I don't think, you know, to what's happening. I mean, I think it's important to be present
Yeah.
at all times. That's the highest spiritual state to me, is to be able to be present. Inside the music, especially, you know, that's for me the really the only place that I feel like I'm 100% present. Um, but I think while you're living through things, you don't really, you know, think about it. Or sometimes, like, I'm not the type of person that thinks about archiving things,
Mm.
so I can't really answer the question in any kind of concrete way, because as far as I knew, you know, I was just living my life. And so with that, you tend to sometimes take things for granted. You don't realize all of the things that you're experiencing, even when they're extra special. Sometimes you don't realize how special they are.
Yeah.
Um, so I would really recommend to anybody to really look at, you know, these moments that we experience and figure out how to savor it. Maybe it is, you know, journaling or archiving somehow, or maybe it's just understanding, you know, the significance of it, and you know, being fully present. So to answer your question, you know, what was it like? Uh, yeah, there was all kinds of things, you know, like happy moments, disappointment, you know, fearful moments and fearless moments. You know, you have to have a lot of courage. You have to be a warrior. I think, you know, in some regard, when you believe in something, you have to, you know, take it all the way. I think that's kind of what most musicians are doing, jazz musicians, because we're not doing it for the money.
Right.
So yeah, so it's about, you know, really being connected to this art form and culture, and jumping in all the way and going for it, because it's a lot of work. So because it's not easy, you have to be committed. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. But I know for me, one of the biggest things that helped me to stay encouraged, even like you said, when you have those moments and you feel like defeat, was seeing the examples in history, being able to see people like Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, Vi Red, reading their stories, but then also digging into people that I could identify myself with, just to kind of give me the motivation and inspiration to keep going. When
Mhm.
you were coming up, were there key women, and it could be musicians or non-musicians, that really kind of helped you to define like that's what I want, or that's what I'm trying to go for?
Well, it's interesting because I always talk about how I didn't really have too many women role models, you know, especially in the music. I mean, I saw a few women play, but it wasn't of interest to me because I was playing, you know, like with Clark Terry when I was 10, and
Right.
you know, teenager doing gigs with Dizzy Gillespie. You know what I mean? So I was on
Yeah.
this kind of level. So if I saw a few women that were maybe on a local level someplace doing it, I wasn't identifying with them or their struggle, and I didn't understand it either. Um, and I think a lot of this has to do with our personalities, because I think I had the kind of personality, and have to some degree, though, you know, I'm evolving just like everybody else and everything else. But if we were to be successful, what I saw was nothing but men being successful. So if I was to be successful, I had to be like them.
Mm.
and I mean, we see this story over and over again, even though it's painted differently. I mean, Billie Holiday was, you can see it from that far back
Yeah.
through all the big bands with women, where you might see out front this image, but behind the scenes, the women were just as hard or cutthroat, and that's how you
Yeah.
had to be sometimes to get, this respect, and especially playing an instrument. So
Right.
my thing was always like, this is my music, I'm equal to you. I don't care, what, I was always just cutting through whatever
Yeah.
the, baloney was.
Yeah.
You know
No,
what
that's,
I mean?
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's funny you
But
say that. No, I'm sorry.
no,
We'll
no,
do it.
no. Yeah, no.
No, I was gonna say it's funny you say that because I remember I was talking with a friend, I think a couple of months ago, and we were talking about that. Like, what is that one unifying thing that we noticed that, like in case of women, the ones that we admired for making it and having that, like you said, that grit and that toughness. What was it that defined that characteristic for them to be able to do those things universally?
Yeah, I
Let's
think
see.
it's a little, I mean, it'd be interesting if we came through some kind of study and felt like there is that one unifying thing. I would think that might be well, it's not desire, but this commitment, to the music, and this part that feels like nobody's going to stop me,
Right.
no matter how that comes out. So you could have a personality type like Jerry Allen, for example, who
Hmm.
was a little more quiet, or people might look at her as being a little more shy, um, polite, but she definitely had that
Fire.
thing that, yeah, that no one's going to stop me. But it came out in a different way. And it's funny that I just chose those words, no one's going to stop me, because when I was 10, that's basically what I said to Buddy Rich when he said, I met him and he said, you better not be good. And I said, well, who's going to stop me?
Ah,
And so I feel like I probably had that without understanding, what it was. It was just, I had enough support up until 10 years old that I felt
right.
like I could do anything. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I'm looking
Yeah.
at, you might be what, people are saying the greatest drummer ever lived, but that's not going to stop me from being great.
Yeah.
So it's that commitment and that what's the word I'm looking for? Perseverance, all those things that have to come in. I think that might be um a unifying factor, along with because what's the thing that makes you feel like there's nothing else I can do? You know what I mean? Like, what's the
Yeah.
thing that makes you feel like this ride or die with this thing? you know,
Yeah.
it's love and commitment. This is it. Passion.
Yeah. And I love that you said it's love because I work with a lot of students with different ages, and especially for young girls when they're starting out in their early teens or mid-teens. That's the one thing I find that we're always having to talk about. How do you love yourself and loving the music and learning and pouring into yourself and developing? That's something I feel like in society we're still kind of struggling with that as women because it's like we value women who give, but then we don't value also, or at least publicly show that there's something to value in pouring into yourself and developing too a craft or something that makes you who you are. How
Hmm.
is it for how do you see it today?
Well, it sounds like you were also talking about self-care and
Yeah, that too.
um, I mean, just yeah, because we have a history, especially Black women, a history of working and making things happen, just making it happen because there's no choice, you
Yeah,
know. And often the thing that suffers, you know, would be our areas of ourselves, you know,
right.
different areas for different people, maybe, but it could be, physically, mentally, spiritually,
Yeah,
um, all those things. So, yeah, I feel like. That really is making me think about a subject matter that I'm going to explore in an exhibit that I'm doing, but it's about invisible labor and how much
Mm,
invisible labor we do
yeah.
and have done traditionally, women in this music. Um, I'm sorry, my dog is scratching at the door, and he's gonna keep doing it probably. If you hear this,
Yeah.
um, yeah. But anyway, I feel like we have to look at this distribution of labor,
Right.
that and how it's often been unfair to us, and how many male artists from the beginning, have really been supported also by women. So this is kind of like, yes, well, he's a genius, so we have to support this genius, and then how there's a bit of freedom, even in the midst of so much oppression. There's
Right.
still a bit of freedom to develop your artistry. And what if women had had that too?
Right. Right. I remember reading somewhere, I think it was actually a documentary I saw, and they were talking about the International Sweethearts of Rhythm and some other women bands too that were around 40s and 50s, and how some of those women, this was an opportunity for them to play.
Hmm.
And after the war ended, it was like, okay, let's get back to business as normal. And some of them, well, a lot of them stopped playing completely because it was this thing of, okay, put that down and get back to our
Right.
role.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't tell me that. I mean, that's amazing that happened.
Yeah.
And it was, a choice, but in some ways not, but I think I want to hear those stories. What happened to some of those women that chose not to?
Yeah.
They weren't supported enough that we know so much about them. Like if we were to look at the sweethearts, I mean, Carlene Ray and Clara Bryant. I mean,
Hmm.
I know they kept playing and had
Right.
careers, right? But I'm not sure, I can't roll off from my tongue a bunch of the other women. And there were other bands. And,
Right.
it'd be interesting to really try to study what happened to these people. Did they just go back because their husbands came back? Or was it because club owners and presenters wouldn't, hire women bands anymore? Like, was it by choice? What, did some of them leave their families like men do, you know, to
Yeah.
pursue?
Yeah. Or deal with the pressure from family for being on the road because there's a whole thing that you take on being a musician and picking up and going off.
Right.
Yeah.
So if because it was back then, we just don't know the answers to these stories as much. I mean, I'm sure there's some of it is archived, but you know, and also that's the other part. Women's history in the music and elsewhere is, hard to find, and
Right.
erasure is real.
Yeah. It's so real. It's funny you said that too because we had Maxine Gordon a couple of weeks ago, and she wrote this book, you already know, on her husband, Dexter Gordon, and she had a chapter in there talking about Melba Liston. And I was so happy to read it because, all my life I've seen pictures of Melba and I've seen the videos of her playing with Dizzy Gillespie and with Quincy Jones, but to see the perspective of what it was like growing up at that time with Dexter and to hear what she was like at 13, 14 years old, where her mind was as far as what she was trying to do and be as a musician, it was so inspiring because it was like, wow, if Maxine never wrote that, I wouldn't have never known what Melba was like when she was developing or what were the things she was into, what was her attitude with dealing with the music.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lesson there too that we do have to archive ourselves. I mean, but I mean, obviously it's easier now, but um, like Mary Lou Williams really did archive herself, so we
Mm,
have a lot to know, about her from journals, diaries, photos, things she saved. There's a lot there that tells a story, right?
right.
Um, Everybody, didn't have that foresight, or it's just not what people do. Like it's not what I do. So if somebody else doesn't take a picture, there will be no pictures.
Right.
So I think we do have to, and I'm thinking about that more myself. I think we have to be more conscious of archiving our stories. Um, just because traditionally that hasn't happened as much for women.
Yeah. There was something I wanted to ask you. So, speaking of archiving, you're in the process of doing something like that, but it's an actual fake book of compositions by women. Could you talk about that project if it's okay?
Yeah. Yes, and thank you for contributing a song to it.
Thank
Um,
you for including me.
yeah, absolutely. But the name of the hi, the name of the book is New Standards 100 Lead Sheets by Women Composers, and
Mm,
it's just a kind of a reaction to looking at a real book and looking for songs that might have been written for by women for an event when I started this institute at Berkeley, and saying, well, let's play some songs written by women. And then when I looked through the real book, I was like, oh wow, and I was like, oh snap, we got to fix this. So that's
yeah.
kind of how it started, and now, like a few years later, we're actually doing it and have 100 songs that will come out in this publication.
Thank you for doing that. It's amazing to think that the real book has been around for this long and that hasn't been done until now. So thank you for taking on that project to do that.
Yeah, and hopefully, it's a start. Meaning, like 100 songs or 100 composers. It's kind of interesting because I found so many more, right? Many
Mm,
more women, so many more than hundreds. So how to pick the songs of the 100 and how to curate that, and how to make a platform where other emerging composers can um, have some of their stuff, and hoping that other people take on similar projects, or just putting the idea out there because there's much more music.
yeah, and it needs to get out there to the world too, because like you said, for so many years, systematically we've kind of been left out. So now it's making a situation where we're including ourselves in there.
Yeah, and that's kind of like corrective work too. It's
Yeah.
kind of writing. I won't say righting a wrong, but fixing something, like you said. Um, but it's not like, I just want to clarify because like the the mission statement, of our institute is,
Hmm.
basically we do things with gender justice and racial justice as guiding principles.
Right.
So, and gender justice and gender equity work is not women's work. So we
Right.
have, a lot of young men in our institute that are concerned with um, a more just future. So I always want to make sure I state that because often people kind of segregate it. Oh, they're over there doing that woman thing.
Right.
And that's not it at all. And
Right.
most progressive men understand that and are on board, or at least want to be, and maybe don't always have all the information
Hmm.
as far as how to be, so it's an interesting time that we're living through, and the possibilities are great.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I believe exactly where you stand as far as how we make fix the situation. It's not necessarily a case of, oh, we got to just be exclusive and make our own. No, we do need situations where we do need to foster and nurture, but then also we need situations where we bring together the two sexes, because the reality is we work together in this world,
Mm.
and to create a situation where it's completely exclusive, well, reality is we're going to be working together with men and women and all kinds of different scenarios. So part of creating the equity is to have a full spectrum of the situation that we're
Mhm.
tending to and or trying to heal or aid.
Yes, and also, speaking of the spectrum, you said that word, and we also talk about the gender spectrum and make sure that we have
Right.
a place and space that's welcoming to everybody. And yeah, it's a lot of a lot of work going on. The
I'm
community is changing. The society is changing.
Yeah, it is, but I know you probably already know. I'm happy that you're doing this work because I mean, for so long it's been needed. So
Oh,
people out there appreciate what you're doing.
thank you. And
I
we
had
appreciate what you're doing too.
oh,
You know, yeah, you're setting a great example for a lot of people. So
oh, thank you. And thank you for just making an opportunity for people like myself and others to do this. So speaking on the generation coming up, were there any differences that you noticed in performing and becoming the Terri Lyne that you notice, I guess we could say, for women musicians then versus now, like the people you work with versus the generation and the mindset today, their mindset today and dealing with the music?
um you mean like you're saying women musicians, composers, like a different way
Yeah,
of what was happening then and
composers,
now? Yeah.
artists, performers, yeah,
Uh-huh.
the mindset.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, immediately thinking about, and see, because when things happen, like I look at the conditions, it's not about a person, it's
Right,
about conditions that create situations. So there
right,
have been, you know, women artists that have believed the narrative that the men play the music and the women sing it, basically. And I remember being in my early 20s and something happened where I was a drummer, at a show where all these different artists came together. And there was a very famous jazz singer that came and brought her own drummer, because just didn't want me to play, with her.
really.
And yeah, and I was the hired drummer, for the gig. And I think it was Ron Carter on bass. And I can't remember, maybe Kenny Barron. I forget who was on piano. But anyway, so I didn't lose respect for her. I just thought, okay, there's something going on here. But then
Mm,
later, somebody that played with her told me that that's what she believed,
huh,
And so when I ran into her the next time, she said something, about the masters, and it was like, okay, she thinks like the masters are the men. And I was emerging, of course, I was
right,
23, I think at the time. And but what's interesting is later, I've done, things paying tribute to this person. Uh and I never had held anything negative in my heart about it because I felt like this is, these are the times, that we're victims of. So sometimes we can't see how um, we replicate
right,
systems of oppression, and I know that I've done it. So I can't, be angry at somebody else as I look back, on things because now I wish the person was alive so I could have this conversation, you know what I mean?
yeah,
But yeah, we replicate these systems, and that's it's all, I'm not gonna say it's all designed, but that's what oppression does. It's like it sets things up so that, for you to feel like you're succeeding, you're replicating, whether it's capitalism or patriarchy, you start replicating these things. So I think we
right,
all have to be more critical of ourselves and really, with a gentleness, of course, but look at what we've done and what we're doing to participate in benefiting, from these forms of oppression.
right. It's funny you say that because I remember even for me coming up when I first got started on the scene, there was a band I remember I was working with, and they were very bent on, not wearing dresses and skirts. And I remember I was talking with a mentor, and I was like, well, what I choose to wear on the bandstand, what I choose to wear. If I want to wear pants, if I want to wear a skirt, as long as I look professional, it's fine. And she gave me some insight. She said the same thing that you said, like, sometimes what we're dealing through, what we're dealing with, and what we're going through at that time, it kind of shapes our thinking and our development, how we deal with these kind of things. So sometimes, even though we're progressing, like you said, there's still that struggle and that fight to free ourselves from those shackles. And part of the younger generation is to understand where they're coming from, but also weigh it to see the good that has been laid down by that generation, but also see those areas where, okay, well, this is the work that I got to pick up and take up on, and hopefully break that door so that we can change what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right, because the work continues, but it also evolves, and we do have to look at the value, that's been created with the work that's come before, and how it functioned in the time period.
Yeah.
And as things change, the work does change and evolve. So we have to, and that's why I think like even when I've spoken with Angela Davis on some of these kinds of issues, why like the youth is so important. There's very few people. Well, I won't say very few, but she's, I think, just different, where she has stayed on top of all of these justice struggles and always thinking about it from a progressive lens. But I think that's because if she's thinking about it from a transformative lens, and we're really looking at how we transform things, I think just thinking that way is progressive, because you're going to move through the times when you're thinking about transformation and not just equality.
Right. So true. Could I ask you to share some words on, or some thoughts on working with, what was it like working with Geri Allen?
Yeah, sure. Well, I first met Geri and played with her when I was, let's see, how old was I? 13 or 14 or something like that. And I went to DC, and she was going to Howard, and Keter Betts, the bassist with Ella Fitzgerald, he brought me there as a guest to play a couple of nights at this club, One Step Down. And we went to Howard, and I did a little drum clinic at Howard, and Geri was a student, as well as Greg Osby, Gary Thomas, Wallace Roney. There were a lot of jazz students, jazz people that became, well-known jazz musicians there. And so I played with her, and I think that was the first time I saw a woman. She was a little older than me, but I looked at her kind of like a peer in essence, even though she was in college and I was in high school, maybe. And I think that was impactful, because I saw another woman, probably the first woman that I played with, that I felt was serious, serious about the music like I was. We didn't really stay in touch so much until I moved to New York. So about 4 or 5 years later, I was, hanging out with her and playing with her a little bit in New York. And then I only stayed in New York 5 years, and I moved to LA. So we did some gigs. We were around when M-Bass started, and did some stuff in that collective. And she did some gigs with me, and then I toured Europe, and she came and played with me. But it wasn't really until I came back east, 15 years ago, that we started playing more regularly. And there's so many things she said that stayed with me, that I look back on, and I'm repeating and quoting now, and didn't really maybe realize the full impact of it when it was being said. Like, one thing is, we played the Vanguard, Esperanza and Geri and myself, and people were telling me to play softer, different like, journalists said it in one of those papers. And then I remember getting off stage one night and asking Lee Konitz, like, was I too loud? He said, I said, I'm trying to play soft, and he was like, I've never heard you play soft. So I'm like getting all paranoid. and I want to make sure people heard Esperanza. And I remember the last night Jack DeJohnette came. I said, how does it sound? Like the balance was, he was like, well, the drums could have been louder, So he said the opposite, and that was Sunday night, so it was all over. But I remember Jerry saying, um, you know, don't think about that. They're trying to silence the drums. They've always tried to silence the drums. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
yeah, I've thought about it a lot more since then. And because it's my nature to not be too obtrusive, so I always hated to, I always my instinct was always to play a little softer, make sure I blended, opposed to, just on the drums, even though that was what was in me, I always, there was that part of me that never wanted to step on somebody.
Yeah.
And I would look at all these other drummers that didn't seem like they were thinking like that. And I'm not saying I would do anything different, because I still don't want to step on people. But
Right.
the one thing I will do is not apologize. If I think I'm being considerate, volume wise, I'm not gonna apologize anymore. The drums are, a loud instrument. So
Yeah.
but that was just one thing. And we used to, just talk about how women just didn't get the same credit, the same due, and how we have to do that. Like she made sure, she wanted to give me the Lifetime Achievement Award at Pittsburgh. What they do that every year, and at the festival, and or the Pittsburgh, what's it called? Symposium or seminar. And she, I know that people said to her, "Well, isn't she too young?" But Jerry wanted, look at, she wanted to look at the body of work, or, since I started so young. And it's things like that, because she was really concerned with how women did not get, the credit. And we talked about how people don't call women geniuses enough. So she was always lifting us,
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I could have had a chance to really meet and talk with her. The only time I got to see her was that gig that you hired us to do for the tribute to the Sweethearts of Rhythm. And I
Oh
saw,
yeah.
yeah, she did like one song with us. And I remember just turning around like, who is that? Because I
Oh,
never
you
got
did.
to see her in person. And I was like, oh wow, that was Jerry Allen. She just completely took us to a whole nother place. Such power and such fire, and it was so inspiring. I know she had to go teach or something, so I went over to her and I said, "Hi, Miss Jerry, I love your music." She's like, "Oh, it's nice to meet you in college." I was like, "Well, I got out of college," and she was like, "Okay," and she's like, "I gotta go, but nice meeting you." And I was like, "Man, I should have reached out to her some more just to talk to her and
Mm.
questions."
I forgot about that. I forgot because she was in and out of there so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
important for me to have her there, though.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you said something that was interesting, like how you, at one point, when she was telling you to just, like they're always trying to contain the drums, and you were saying, well, I always kind of feel the opposite, not trying to. I I know for me, when I was coming up, I was kind of having those same thoughts and feelings too, like, well, okay, I play the tenor, but Dexter sounds so good and big and loud, but I don't want to get to the bottom of the horn because I don't want to distract anybody. Could you talk about your process and changing that that sense of how you see or think of yourself in that? Because I know a lot of girls, when I talk to young students, that's the one thing they're dealing with, overcoming their natural intentions of, maybe they're shy, or maybe they feel like they're coming out of their shell, or it's not something that they would normally do, but embracing the uncomfortable and embracing seeing themselves as musically being beyond just what they are here.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I think confidence is a big part of it.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a bit of a double-edged sword, so to say, because I feel like I had all the support in the world to be confident, like, and so I had this kind of confidence at 10 telling Buddy Rich, who's going to stop me. But then on the other side of that, there's this, maybe it's part of how women have been socialized, but
Mm,
there's this part of me that doesn't want to be impolite or, you know,
push.
doesn't want to, yeah, step on somebody's toes or,
Yeah.
and it's for me, it's the same thing with being shy. There's a
Mm,
part of me that's shy, but then there's a part of me that's really extroverted.
mm,
So I think it's about embracing these things, and I don't have to be one thing. That's
right.
why I don't like labels. I don't like any kind of label. I don't like music labels or any kind of label. And because something that Bernice Johnson Reagan said once while introducing a song, she said, "I am what I am at this particular moment, and that will have to be sufficient."
That's
And
right.
that always stay with me because I'm all of these things, and I think most women are.
Yeah.
So how we and when we choose to share what we share, sometimes it's going to be, powerful, like, warrior, like I'll go toe to toe with anybody, you know, and
Yeah.
then sometimes it's going to be, you know, not that, just uh, sensitive, polite, nurturing, all of these things that we are naturally as well. So I think um, maybe, we have an advantage to some degree with that once we're okay with it.
Right.
Like once we're able to embrace being all of these things, and same thing for men. I think they can be all these things too, but again, socially, men are supposed to be, tough, and all these, qualities that do come out in the music.
Right.
So, what is a feminine aesthetic, in the music, and I think that's what we're looking at, searching to see if there is something different, or I think if you experience the world differently, that's going to come out somehow, you
Yeah.
know and so for me, like, I settled on what I would consider an aggression, with my playing, and a seduction with my playing,
Mm,
and how they can coexist,
right.
because I do think we have to seduce the listener.
We do.
um Yeah, so you have to figure out that balance. I mean, I wish, at least for me, the kind of jazz. If I go to a club and I hear, people that are just hitting me over the head with stuff all the time, it doesn't speak to me. You know?
Right. Yeah. I think sometimes too, I was gonna say something. Darn it, my brain is freezing. Sometimes there's that balance I always think about of the directness, but at the same time, like you said, the luring of being able to bring the person in as a listener, but be very clear in knowing exactly where you want to go. Where it's not coming off as you are confident, but it's not coming off as, domineering, like, but it's more of like, I know where I stand, but I know where I'm going. Come with me, kind of
Mhm.
balance.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you have authentic and true confidence, that's what it comes off as. If it's not mixed up with control and power and these other things, and more of an oppressive you know way of having to have power over other people, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? So when it's really just confidence, then you have patience.
Yeah.
I think you have to have patience, all these things, compassion.
Yeah.
And when you know who you are, it's a lot easier to have all that. That makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. I remember I was talking with Hammy Blue at one time because he was really a close mentor of mine.
Mhm.
And he would every now and then he'd just call me and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just home. Come on over." So I would make these little meals for him and cook it for him and bring it over. And instead of it just being a hang, it would turn into a magical lesson every
Mhm.
time. And I remember he said something like, it's okay to be who you are and embrace the feminine qualities that make you who you are. So you don't have to get angry to play fiercely. You can play with power and play with fierceness, but not necessarily come from that place we associate as anger or dominance or anything. Because he was like, that's the beautiful thing about us. We all bring different things by nature of who we are, and they make us different, but at the same time, they also add to the music, making the experience even more um, how could I say more layers to it that makes it more enjoyable and to embrace that. And I was just thinking of that while you were talking. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's it right there. I mean, he's exactly right. And like I remember, there's it's part of me that if I was on the road, I remember liking, if I went to get myself a cup of coffee or a piece of pie or whatever it was, and then I was say, going to go talk to Herbie about the set.
Mm,
I would naturally just bring him. I knew how he liked his coffee from traveling with him, right? So
yeah.
I would, bring him his coffee, and that's something I liked to do. You know what I mean? I mean, quite frankly, nobody was bringing me any coffee or anything, which was fine. But I'm just saying, um, I didn't look at it as this is me being soft, or or trying to kiss somebody's butt or any of that stuff. It was more like this is something I want to do. So when you mentioned bringing the food over there, like, yeah, I would do that sometimes
Yeah.
too, like bring some food to a rehearsal. And
Yeah.
like I remember I used to talk about making soups. I was into the soup phase when I
Yeah.
was playing with Al Jarreau.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like, really? He's like, I want to taste it or something. I remember we were flying somewhere and I brought him this soup because I told him I would. But this time I screwed the soup up. Like I just put too much salt in it.
Oh
And I'm like, a decent cook.
no.
uh, and I just brought it anyway. I don't know why I should have just not brought it, but I just brought it anyway. And he was so like, gracious because I said, Al, I'm sorry, it's too salty. And you know how you taste something when it's hot, it doesn't taste as salty, and then it cools, and then it's more salty. Like you
Yeah.
can taste it later more,
It
right?
settles.
And so I had brought something myself too, and I got on the plane. He was in first class. I was, somewhere in coach, but and I tasted it, and I was like, "Damn, this is salty!" Like it was worse than I thought. And I went to him after the plane landed, and I was like, "I'm sorry, Al, that was just too salty." And he said, "Yeah, but there's nothing a little sugar won't fix. Just put a little sugar in it." And I just thought it was so sweet of him, because he just appreciated that I brought it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love those kind of stories because it just it makes everything just so human and real, and that's what I think the spirit of the music is and where it lies. Like,
Definitely.
even like I remember somebody when I was on tour with the orchestra, and they were talking about Diane, how she threw down one time when they were passing through, and I was like, oh wow, that must have been so cool to like just hang as people and embrace and fellowship and share, and that it's about the music, but it's so much deeper than that.
Hmm. No, it is. That's what goes back to what you originally said about community and culture. And, that's a big part of our culture. And I think it has to do with, quite frankly, I mean, I'm just saying this off the cuff. I hadn't given this a whole lot of thought, but I do think it's about, uh, the previous times when Black people couldn't stay in hotels. And
Mhm.
often we had to, my dog is trying to break the door down again. But you know, Black people had to often stay at people's homes, right, when they were
Right,
traveling to gigs.
right.
And so there's this, I think part of our culture is when musicians come to town, we feed them. I remember Papa Joe Jones, Lewis Hayes, Clark, all staying on our couch.
Mm.
There was no extra bedroom, but they didn't have any problem, sleeping on the couch. So, just that thing of our home is open to you. And I think also happens with just meals.
Right. Yeah. You get to really commune and fellowship. Yeah.
Well, there's a
Uh,
history there. There's reasons, you know.
yeah. 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 Well, I know we're almost running out of time, but if you have some words of wisdom for a young lionesses out there listening, what would you tell them as a word of encouragement or advice on their journey?
Wow. Well, I think the first thing is, that this is your music, so take ownership in it. You're not being invited to a party. Like, never look at it like you're on the outside trying to, you know, get acceptance, and look at it more like, you're the master or mistress of ceremonies. You're throwing the party. You're the manager. You're the club owner. You know what I mean? If this were a
Yeah.
club, you're the president or whatever that is. It's your place as much as anybody else's, and in actuality, you can decide who rolls with you. You know what I mean? It's like just
Yeah.
that ownership, and that's one thing. Not looking for approval.
Yeah. Oh, that's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's huge in so many ways, not just the music, but even in how we present ourselves.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah. And being authentic, because when you're not looking for approval, that's when you're more in tune with your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And your only competition is yourself.
That's right.
That's really important one. Because what's got me through, like when I was in my 20s, because the saxophone player named Candy Johnson told me that when I was a teenager.
He's about to bang that
and he said a couple of things. He said, your only competition is yourself, and no matter who somebody else is, they can only do one gig at a time. It's just
yeah.
something that just, like nobody has a monopoly on gigs. So, you know what I mean? You can only be one place
Exactly.
at a time. So there's room for a lot of people. But
Yeah.
when I thought about that, it made me feel like I may not be this person, I may not be that person, but I'm the best Terri Lyne Carrington that there is.
Yeah.
And when I looked at it like that, it really helped me to not do that comparison thing.
Mm. Well, Terri, thank you so much for joining me today. I thoroughly enjoyed talking with you, and I know a lot of the listeners out there enjoyed hearing your words of wisdom and just hearing your story. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Camille. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
And listeners out there, young lionesses, we're going to continue this series all the way through April. This month for Women's History Month, we decided to do it every month, every week, but we're going to resume back to doing it bi-monthly in April. And our guests are Diane Reeves, which is going to be April 6th, and Jasmine Horn, which is going to be April 20th. So if you want to join in or you want to stay in touch, you could just subscribe to the mailing list at www.camillethurmanmusic.com/thehavenhang. And this is open to all Lioness musicians or female identifying musicians, artists, whatnot, and educators and parents who just want to know what the heck we're thinking about on this journey. Thank you so much for joining me. Please give it up again for Terri Lyne Carrington, and keep your mask on and stay safe, and hope to see you soon.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, Terri.
Oh, you're welcome, Camille. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
It's great to get to talk to you.
I know, right? We should be doing that anyway. Life is so crazy and so busy.
Yeah. It's funny too. I'm in Martha's Vineyard right now.
That's my second home.
Yeah, Daryl was like, you should let Terri know you're in the area. And I was like, oh, wow, she's probably busy.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah, yeah. But thank you again for doing this. I do hope we'll get to see each other or play or get to connect and hug and hang sometime soon.
I hope so too. I'm sure we will. We're coming to the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. Please give my love to your parents too.
I will. I will for sure. Yeah, my father's a big fan. So
Oh,
good. I will.
yeah. All right. Thank you,
Okay.
Ari, for doing this. Terry, take care, and good to see you, Yustra.
Bye bye, Yusra and Ariana.